Hi, everybody. Good evening. I am Bosco Shell. I'm a trustee of the David M. Hunt Library in Falls Village, your library. And I am very happy to welcome you all on behalf of the library to this very special event with our good friend, Jim Kennedy of Salisbury Wines. Jim is a great friend and a neighbor in Falls Village. And we're very, very thankful to him that he was willing to cooperate with us and to undertake this very, I hope, joyful journey on the wine trail. During this difficult time in the pandemic, our wonderful staff and volunteers have been able to keep the library functioning with on-curb pickups and the art wall and story hour every Saturday with our reader, even when it was cold outside under the tent. And the library has stayed functioning very, very well indeed. During this time, we still cannot get together and have live functions. So as a result, even though the library now is open to business and you may come there and take out your books and children may come in, families may come in one by appointment, just wear a mask and keep your distance. Those are the only closure regulations right now. But we welcome you to the library. But in the meantime, because we cannot have any live events, the library has started these very interesting Zoom events for your edification and your education. And speaking of education, what better field to be educated than the noble wine? And so Jim is helping us to do that. So please join us, enjoy yourself, and ask any questions as we go along. Jim will be happy to answer them. I'm going to turn this event over now to our wonderful Frankie Lacoste of Falls Village, and he will then carry on the conversation with Jim. Frankie, over to you.
Thank you, Bosco. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Jim, thank you for being here. I, for one, have been counting down the minutes throughout the day to get to this glass of wine. And I will echo exactly what Bosco said. I love the shop, love coming in to get to talk to you. I feel like every time I come in, I learn something new, and hopefully we can do that here in the conversation. But before we get started, for those who have a glass and want to play along at home, cheers. Thank you for joining us. And Jim, thank you for leading us through what I know is going to be an awfully fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you guys.
But why don't we actually start there? Because I'm not sure if everybody on the call knows you. Do you want to give a little bit of a sense for your background and your history?
Of course. So I actually grew up here in the northwest corner. I lived in Sharon until I was like 15 or so, and then we moved to Salisbury, where I lived until I graduated from high school. I joined the military for 6 years, and when I was getting out, my wife and I were thinking of places to move, and I said, I know this little place. You may love it, and it was an easy move. So we came up here. We've been here now for, well, I don't actually don't know how long, 16, 17, 18 years, something like that. So we love it here, and we just moved over to, we're in Amesville, so we have a Falls Village address, but we pay Salisbury taxes, so we love that part.
Oh, you get the best of both worlds right there.
We do, yeah, exactly right. But we love Falls Village. We that's where we walk and we take our kids and take our dogs for walks and all that stuff. So it's good to be back in this part of the country and this part of the state, especially. So
that's such an interesting background. How did you end up where you are? How did you get into the wine industry more broadly?
Yeah, sure. So when I got out of the military, I was in the Coast Guard, and I was a search and rescue. I flew in search and rescue helicopters and law enforcement, stuff like that. But I worked on advanced electronics and avionics. But so when I got out, there's not really those kind of jobs didn't exist up here. So I started a catering company. And from that, I started working here at Salisbury Wines. And then I worked at a restaurant for a little while, came back to Salisbury Wines. And then I left Salisbury Wines again to work as a wholesaler. So I sold wine to stores and restaurants for 4 years. And then when the previous manager, who a lot of people know, Warren, was retiring, they asked me to take his job. That was it. That's pretty much my pathway to this store, to the job I have right now. For this.
What I'm always impressed about is the breadth of knowledge that you have. Every time I come into the store, how did you learn so much? I mean, obviously you've spent some time in the space getting to learn the grape, but you have never ever steered me wrong with a bottle of wine.
Thank you. I mostly learned by drinking wine. Working in this store, so I worked it out one day. I think I taste about 7 wines for every 1 wine represented in the store, and I probably drink 1,200 or taste 1,200 to 3,000 different wines a year. So it's really just about trying 1,000 different things or thousands of different wines and spirits, and reading books and paying attention. I guess when I'm tasting, I'm not necessarily, there's like a million questions I have in my head that I'm trying to answer right then and there. And I think that's pretty much it. It's been a fun learning experience, and had I known that you could do this for a living, maybe I would have studied it in school, but I'm not sure it's necessary. It just kind of, I just kind of fell into it and love it. And I love the nuances in wine and the idea of making it. And I love that it's made by farmers not for the most part. Corporations still, obviously they control the wine business, but the wines in our store and the wines that I like are really made by farmers that are just families, husband and wife. You go to their vineyard and they're wearing their clothes that it's not fancy. They don't have a suit and tie on. They're wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and we're tasting wine in their dusty old cellar, and they're so excited about it. And I think that kind of passion for that kind of for their own product is sort of makes me happy and brings me further into this wine journey.
It's an interesting point you bring up about tastings and the million questions that you said that go through your head when you're tasting something for the first time. So I guess it's a 2-part question. One, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're drinking right now?
Oh, sure.
And lifting up from that, walk us through that process of tasting. So if I'm tasting wine for the first time, what should I be asking myself?
So right now I'm drinking this Domaine du Savard Cheverny, imported by Kermit Lynch, who I'm a big fan of. Kermit Lynch, and we sell tons of. I think we're probably the number 1 or number 2 Kermit Lynch store in the state of Connecticut. It's 85% Sauvignon Blanc and 15% Chardonnay. It's unoaked. It's made again by a family. Domaine du Savard is a family-run winery. But when I'm starting to drink a bottle of wine or taste a bottle of wine, you clearly pour it into a glass, smell it, because you have to sort of bring all your senses in. Just like when you're eating, you should think about wine as a food product or as food. So when you're, when you have a bowl of pasta, something simple, you smell it, or the smell is coming off of the food, and that sort of brings you in. You see it, and then you taste it. So same with wine. You smell it, look at the color. You're looking for depending on the wine, but we'll just go the middle of the road. You're looking for like clean. You don't need a lot of stuff floating around. Wines have different color profiles. I mean, we could talk for an hour just on that. So depending on the wine I'm trying, I'm looking at the different colors. This other bottle that we have open is a red wine, which I'll just show you for contrast. When you're looking at red wine, try to see through it. You're looking really just for the varietal color. The next step is to swirl it. The swirling does 2 things. One, it adds oxygen to the wine, which makes it taste better. But really, sort of the forgotten piece of this is that when a byproduct of fermentation is CO2, and CO2 has a very acidic flavor. So when you're drinking a bottle of wine, sometimes when you first taste it, like it either will taste in a negative way or in a positive way. It'll add this acid to it. Think of it like Coca-Cola. When you drink Coca-Cola, it tastes somewhat balanced when it still has bubbles. But when those bubbles go away, it just tastes like syrup, like very sweet, sickly sweet syrup. So with wine, it's the same thing. There's not enough CO2 in here to make it bubble, but it's there. So as that dissipates, the wine sort of comes into its own and tastes a little bit more balanced. So we do that, and then the next thing is just tasting it. A lot of people will taste the wine, put it in your mouth, and then slurp, and that sort of adds more oxygen to the wine, gives it a different kind of flavor. But I think a lot of it has to do with that built-in CO2 that's still in the wine. What else was I thinking? I continually smell the wine too. I very sort of I use my nose more than I think I use, equal to maybe my taste buds, because a lot of times you can pick up all these different like notes in the wine, or a lot of times with the smelling, you're picking up flaws in the wine. Everybody's had a wine where they just wince at the taste or you wince at the smell, but if you can avoid putting it in your mouth by smelling it first and making sure it's not corked or it has some sort of something else going on, negative thing.
Do you normally like to decant it before you do a tasting? So does it just depend on the wine, the variety?
Professionally, never decant it, because the salesperson is coming with just a little bit of wine, letting you try it, but he has to move, or he or she has to move on to the next location, to the next store or restaurant. At home, always. Generally not with white wine, but red wine, I always pour it into something a little bit fancier looking. It just looks nicer on the table. And again, this wine is like food. It's if I'm having a bad day, there's not a wine in the world you could put in front of me that's going to taste as great as it does when I'm having a good day, or when I'm having friends and this the kind of stuff that we used to do, or that we're starting to do again, or that people are doing outside. It really makes a big difference for me. The whole idea, the look, the taste, everything down the line.
And we just got a great question from Barbara. Do you swirl red and white? Do you have to vary it, but
no,
based off of what you're drinking?
Yeah, always a swirl. I mean, it really, as the wine opens up, you don't have to do this anymore. This is, for me, every time I pick up a glass, if there's water in it, I swirl it. But that's a habit, I think, so you'll see me swirl it all night long. But if I'm enjoying wine at dinner, or if anybody is, you're really only swirling it the first time, because as the wine is open and you've poured a glass, or you get it outside of the, wine is filled up to here. Generally, once it's down into here, air is getting in there. You don't need to swirl it anymore. That kind of goes away, or especially if you decant it into a glass, that the swirling is done. But yeah, both red and white swirl. White especially. White tends to have a lot of that CO2 pent up because it's generally drank younger than red.
Don't judge me. I haven't really decanted much. So a very tactical question.
I mean, it's not necessary.
Well, if you are going to do it, what's the right way to do it? How early do I do it? How long do I do it?
That depends on the wine. So if you're drinking a very casual bottle of wine, inexpensive, easy drinking, I wouldn't decant something like that. If we're outside at a barbecue, I don't make it a point to go grab a decanter. But if you're having a nice dinner and you're having a Pinot Noir or a Cabernet or something that you feel will benefit from the air, if you're spending decent money on a bottle of wine, you can decant it. Again, it's not necessary, and for me, it just adds to the overall experience. And it does give the wine some oxygen. It lets it sort of, that CO2 escapes. That it does make it taste better. It just, maybe sometimes when you're drinking a glass of wine, you're having it with dinner, the third glass towards the end of the night tastes better than, markedly better than the first glass. And that may be because you had a couple glasses of wine, but to be honest, it's probably just that surface contact in the air, and it had a chance to come into its own. So
I'm chuckling a little bit because you also know When I come into the store, I will often play the game with you, and I've done it across the pandemic. It's a Tuesday. I need to drink a drinkable bottle of wine under 15 bucks. That has been my favorite game across the past year.
But
And
it's everybody's favorite game right now is, how can I maximize my bang for my buck?
you're always so good at it. So why don't you do this? Can you tell us about some of your favorites right now at all different price points?
Sure, of course. So this is a strange time for wine, actually. This time of year is when the wines start to show up, but there has been a tariff on wine for a couple years now. So a lot of importers were holding off on bringing in wines. So I'm actually not tasting as much wine as I'd like to right now. But if I was going to pick inexpensive wine that I really love, Spain is always a great, if you're looking for value wine, you cannot beat Spain. Italy would be a close second place, but Italy has very expensive wines as well. So depending on your shop, you can go and not necessarily find something that's priced right for you in Italy. But Spain, definitely. Grenache from Spain is one of my favorite grapes, white and red, Garnacha Blanca, and they call it Garnacha. It's the same grape as Grenache in France or the United States. Tempranillo, you can always find, there's a bottle of Cune Tempranillo that's on the shelf for $13. It's everything you're looking for in a Rioja Spanish wine. It's not necessarily the most interesting wine, but it is like just great for a Tuesday night. If you're just looking for that with burgers or something.
Or when you're getting into your fifth bottle.
Yeah, if you're getting into your fifth bottle, the Cune is a great choice. And in Spain, and that's what it's everywhere. The airport, the gas station. I mean, Cune is one of the sort of big brands there, but it's just great quality for the money. The mid-range wines, I tend to go to France or Italy. This Cheverny sits on the shelf for like $18, but I think there's a ton of value here. We sold 1,000 bottles last year. It's really, really popular, especially around here. This Langarosa, which some people may have come in and bought, is great. I mean, this is 18 bucks. It's
so light. I think what amazed me there is I go in expecting a red to be a little bit heavier. And you had turned me on to that after a little bit more expensive a bottle of a Pinot Nero had sold out, which was also fabulous.
Right. The Langaroso, the thing that makes it so light, as you guys can see, is you can see me through it. It's 90% Nebbiolo, which is a very light grape, but it is also the grape of Barolo and Barbaresco. So some of the more expensive Italian wines. In fact, I think we sold a bottle of Barolo for $700 this year. So it can be very expensive. But this has a little bit of white wine blended in too, which is more common than a lot of people think. So I've had a little pushback with this wine. If I'll say, oh, there's white blended in, people just go, I don't want it. But it does happen more than people are aware of. The white wine is imparted on this wine because they take the skins from the white wine that they make and put it on top of the red wine, and it just sort of works its way down into the wine. So the percentage is 10. That's just kind of the guesstimate. It could be up to 30%, but that's what makes it so light. But even though it's a light wine, it's still plenty. It still has plenty of fruit and acid, and it's very well balanced. I'm a fan.
It pairs so well with a number of dishes, right? So maybe as many of us have been cooking across the past year and inevitably are experimenting with wine with those meals. How do you like to approach how you pair food and wine?
I think I have a different approach to pairing wine and food than most people. I really believe that you should drink what you love, and then we'll kind of pare it down a little bit. If you love Cabernet and you're having a salad, maybe not the best choice. But if you love Cabernet and you're eating something dinner, big, you could have it with lasagna or barbecue. Or I think that people get really hyper focused on the pairing thing, and which makes sense in a restaurant setting. If you're going to spend 4 times what you're going to spend in this store for a bottle of wine, it may make more of a difference. But if you're just going home, it's you really should just drink what you love. And if what you love isn't necessarily right on track with what we're eating, then we can kind of like um, work on something else. But somebody in the chat said that they think bubbles pair well with so many types of food. That person is that's what I drink at home is champagne. I love it. I love everything about it. I drink it with everything. It doesn't matter where we can have something
Even
very,
throughout the dinner, not just as like cocktails.
No, I drink a lot of champagne. I'm a big fan of champagne. I'm not necessarily a big fan of big heavy wines with food. I know that you're supposed to have them, but you have a time and place. With if we're having something really sort of significant, then I'll have red wine, of course, with the main course. But through,
Andrea, I'm the one who actually was saying because I think bubbles people don't realize like do light, medium, and full body, and you have everything from the blancs to the rosés to the vintage. And so depending, you can have it as an aperitif or as you can finish off. And
Yeah.
you can have it right in the middle of your dinner. And and it's also the easiest to clean up. You can mix it up with different types of glasses to serve in, from vintage ones with coupes to everything else. And you can also do price points, right? You can get everything
Yeah.
from a Franciacorta to a more, and to a really a great vintage champagne. So, and the small cult vintage are some of my very, very favorite, the smaller producers. But anyway, those were my 2 cents when I was listening to food. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I
everybody.
appreciate it. That you're right. I mean, bubbles go all the way through the meal. If you're having a very rich and heavy dish, you could switch to red in the middle, but I always end up switching back to champagne.
It brings up a really interesting point. I feel like I'm hearing so much more about grower champagnes than I used to. Can you explain that to me and to everyone on the call?
Grower champagne it's a very simple sort of concept. It's most wines are grower wines. The person who grew the grapes then made the wine with those grapes. Champagne is different because they have a very specific region in France where the wine can be grown. And there's so many growers that a lot of big companies like Veuve Clicquot and we'll just use Veuve Clicquot as an example. They buy all the grapes. They use very little estate grown food. So they will go to a farmer and say, "Hey, would you sell us your grapes for 20 years?" And the farmer says yes. And then they sort of blend them all together, and that's called a negociant wine. Growers just grow the grapes themselves and they make the wine themselves. It's kind of how everything used to be done before huge conglomerates came and over. Champagne is really the only.
Because at that point, are you paying more for the branding and the marketing than potentially the grape?
Oh yeah. With something like Veuve Clicquot, you're paying for marketing. You're paying for that orange bottle. You're paying for that. The company's LVMH. Google. They're the biggest luxury company in the world, and they are not shy about making money.
So while we're talking about different varieties, rosé. So you were talking about drinking what you love. I love rosé and can drink it throughout most of the year. I shy away from the winter, but I feel like it's controversial. And Bosco and I have talked about this, right? I think we've both heard you say that rosé goes great with turkey. So you can drink
rosé is great, but it's best. Julia Child said rosé is the best food wine. And I think she kind of stood by that for her entire career. It really is. I mean, it's red wine. It's made the same way red wine is made. They just take the skins off super early. All grapes have white juice. So when you're pressing even Cabernet, whatever, you're getting white juice first. And then the color and everything is imparted by the skins. So, of course, there's exceptions to everything that I'm going to say, especially with the wide thousands of different grape varieties. But so you can make rosé out of anything. And it is, a well-made rosé, you could drink all year long. I mean,
I feel like people reserve it from from Memorial Day to Labor Day.
Yes, they do. For the most part, that is true. Yeah, we carry it year round. I mean, I think as we've been in business, we've kind of maybe just given people the opportunity to buy rosé all year, and they always do. I mean, we have a few that last us. The other thing about rosé is a lot of producers don't make a ton of it. They'll make what they think they need to make, and then it kind of runs out. So it's a function of both people stopping drinking it when it starts to get cold, and it's out of stock. I mean, your favorite rosés are gone by August, September.
I heard there was a run on rosé in the Hamptons last summer. It was chaos.
I would imagine there was probably there was a run on rosé here. I mean, we more rosé than we've ever sold.
So
There's a
should I get my order in early, is what I'm hearing?
I would imagine there's more this year. I think we'll be well. We've already ordered, I don't even know, hundreds of cases of rosé. We'll be ready, and most people will. It the harder to get ones run out quicker, I think.
We're having some great questions coming in, so why don't I turn to
Yeah.
those quickly? So the first one is around alcohol content. Some are really
Sure.
high, some are a little bit lower. What are your kind of thoughts on taste and alcohol content?
Low. The lower the better. And that's my personal preference. People, I'd say Americans in general, is a higher alcohol content is what they like. I mean, this red's 13%. I mean, you can go really high with it, but I like to drink a lot when I'm when we're, so not by myself, but in a social setting, I like to drink. I'll drink a bottle of wine. I'm a bigger guy, so I can do it. But it makes it easier when the wine is 13%, 13 and a half, 14. Some of the bigger cabs and things like that is somebody said as high as 15.2%, but it gets as high as 17%. So wine can really, if the Priorat from Spain or Zinfandel from California, it can start to get to be a bit much after the third bottle. I mean, when you're talking about 1 or 2 percentage points, it can sometimes be as much as 10 or 20% of the bottle of wine, which is another glass at the very least. So I do like lower, not low, not super low, but mid-range alcohol content. 12 and a half, 13, 14%. I think it does make a difference. Sometimes the higher alcohol wines can taste a little out of balance. If you drink a glass, swallow what was in your mouth, and then just breathe in. These two wines, you're not going to get any of that sort of alcohol. Everybody knows what that alcohol, that menthol sort of like makes your mouth cold. When you're drinking a high alcohol wine, you can feel it, you can taste it, and you definitely feel it the next morning.
Building off of that, someone asked about natural wine. So can you talk more about natural wine? And then also they asked about orange wine.
So natural wine is a newer sort of concept. Natural wine is also not defined by law, especially in the United States. They're starting in France. They're toying with a natural designation, but it doesn't have a legal definition. So right now, what it means is generally a wine that's organically grown, made by a small producer, not using yeast that they bought from a lab, usually using yeast that exists on the grapes and stems and things like that. Sometimes it's great, and sometimes natural wine can go a different direction that I don't necessarily love. We probably have 20 natural wines in the store at the moment, and I love natural wine. I think producers that have been doing it forever, they know what they're doing. One of my favorite wines going right now is a natural wine. But there are some that it's a strange category.
I have a friend who swears that she will not get a hangover from natural wine. Logic to it? Is it a lower alcohol content?
Probably alcohol content, if I'm being completely honest. This is a very sort of touchy subject in wine right now. Sulfites and things like that people are very aware of them, but sulfites are in everything. I mean, not everything, but pickles and things like that have very high content of sulfites. Granted, you're not drinking, a bottle of pickle juice in a night. So it really could be. I would never say to someone, if you think sulfur is what's bothering you, then it might be what's bothering you. So we have wines in the store that have no sulfites added. Sulfites are used as a preservative in wine, but they also are a byproduct of fermentation. So anything that's fermented has sulfites in them. It just depends on the amount. California wines, like cheap Cabernet from California, has a lot of sulfur, but this Arnaca Blanca that we have, it has none added. To talk about orange wine is. Let me see if I have a bottle laying around here. Al, could you grab me a bottle of the Puy Gros orange wine? Imprevisible. Yeah, it's on the shelf over there. Orange wine is white wine. You could call it skin contact wine. So it's white wine that has spent time while it's fermenting on the skin. So the skins of white grapes start to impart this very, they're green. So it imparts this sort of orangish color. So we have a new one. But you can see the color of an orange wine. That's what it's supposed to look like. I mean, this camera is not great, so it doesn't really come through, but it has an orange top. So it's really just a skin contact white. That one that I showed you is a skin contact Garnacha Blanca from Spain that's aged in amphora, which are these big clay pots it sits on the skin for about 6 months. No sulfur added. That's a wine that would be considered a natural wine. There's organically grown grapes, no sulfur added, and it's delicious.
Here's an interesting question. How can you avoid getting a stuffed nose when drinking red wine? It happens to me all the time. Is it related to the price of the wine?
I don't know if it's related to the price of the wine. I would wonder if that person, if they find it a higher sort of frequency of getting a stuffy nose when you're drinking inexpensive wine, they have something to do with histamines and things like that, when they pick the grapes, they don't necessarily wash them. So there's a lot of stuff that's built up on there, pollen and chemicals, what am I trying to say? Fertilizers and pesticides and all that stuff. It could be anything. I don't get a stuffy nose when I drink red wine, but I'm curious. I wonder if that's probably just has to do with whatever is on the grapes. Histamines. Maybe you're allergic to something in the wine or the winemaking.
Oh, and we just heard from someone else that alcohol can cause congestion in certain people. So biological function.
Yeah.
Another question about rosés. The differences between European rosés.
Is a very broad question.
Well, maybe we could look at it this way. So a lot of people will say they want a really pale rosé as opposed to a red rosé. Can you walk us through that? And I don't know if it corresponds to where they're produced or not.
It can, yeah. So there are a couple different ways to make rosé. The most common way is what people will do is they basically are making a red wine. So to get more color and concentrate the color of the red wine, they drain off the bottom stuff. So the bottom stuff is that it's rosé. I mean, it's red wine that they're making, and off comes what they're draining out of the bottom to sort of concentrate the color and things like that out of the wine. That was kind of how rosé was invented. The other way is to just press very lightly. When we talked about how all grape juice is white, they'll continually press until they get the color that they want, and then have that sort of juice. And then the third way is a simple red and white wine blend. In France, in Provence and things like that, the way that they make most rosé is that sort of draining method. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but the wine is meant to be drunk early and soon. So the higher end rosés, tend to be the ones where they just kind of press, where look for the color they're looking for, and out it comes. The other thing about rosé that makes the color different is the grape. A lot of times the wine, the different grapes, just some of them have very thick skins, the red, some have very light, thin skins, and it imparts a different level of color. Like if you're having a rosé from Grenache or Garnacha in Spain, it's going to be quite dark. The winemaker stylistically maybe wants a darker rosé. We have trouble selling dark rosés here at the store because people tend to think they're going to be sweeter, but it's not always.
You said an interesting comment that some of the higher end, more expensive rosés. I've heard certain people say that you just shouldn't spend a lot of money on a rosé. Is that accurate?
If you're drinking it with friends in a cocktail party, it doesn't matter. I mean, if it's right, it's right for the thing. But rosé can get expensive. I've seen a bottle of that's right here that's $150 for rosé. So rosé can be thought of as a very serious wine. There's nothing saying it shouldn't be.
I'll also plug the $14 rosé that you have, that after you've had the expensive bottle is a very admirable substitute.
It's a great, I mean, Rosé doesn't have to be expensive, but just like any wine doesn't necessarily have to be expensive to be good. You have to be aware that the lower priced rosés, there's going to be a higher frequency of bad ones there, just like any wine. As you spend a little bit more, 15 or so, you're good. It's also cheaper to make rosé. They make it and then they sell it. There's no aging requirement for rosé. You know, we're drinking 2020 rosés this year. So they didn't have to age it. They just bottled it up and sent it over here. So that adds to the costs with some reds and things like that.
So let's say somebody does want to come in and buy a really lovely bottle, or for those collectors on the call that want to add to their collection, where would you steer them? What would you recommend? So if we go to that other.
For rosé, if they were trying to buy.
No. I've moved on from rosé. I promise I won't bug you about rosé anymore. I've just more broadly, for those who want a nice bottle, what would you recommend? What should they look for? And if they also want to add to their collection?
Yeah, I think let's see. I think the thing about collecting wine, which is something that I don't do, I buy wine that I love and I put extra bottles in my basement, really almost as a science experiment, because I think about it like I tried this in 2020, I tried it in 2021, 2022, 2023, see kind of where it goes. And it gives me a better idea of what, when I taste a wine similar to that other one, I know where it's going to go in its life. But if you're a collector, as silly as it sounds, you have to focus on things like scores and stuff that I personally don't focus on ever. But for collecting, if you're doing it to make money, you have to focus on scores and great vintages and things like that. If you're doing it as an investment, you really have to pay attention to vintages. If you're doing it because you love it, buy the great wines that you love. Things like Bordeaux and Cabernet from California, and Barolo from Italy, and Priorat from Spain, and Rioja from Spain. Rioja from Spain I just ordered some 1964 Rioja from Spain. I mean, it is one of those age-worthy wines. So if you're just trying to buy wine to have great wine around all the time, you kind of stick with those big names that everybody knows. A Cab, California Cab, Bandol, red Bandol, things like that. That sort of, it just takes a little research. If somebody came in today and said, I need a bottle of wine that I wanted to age for the next 25 years, I'd probably go to grab them a bottle of real age.
And when it comes to storing it, so what is your take on storing wine? Expensive wine, inexpensive wine? Do we need a wine refrigerator? What's your take?
I think we're very lucky in New England because your basement probably is the right temperature. As long as it's not right next to your furnace or something like that, you have that sort of geothermal saves you. I mean, the cellar at my house is completely, I don't have any temperature control. And it stays cold. And people who have come from, salesmen who will meet me at my house to taste wine, they'll go into my wine cellar and say, oh, it feels like Burgundy down here. I mean, it's really sort of, we're lucky in that sense. You just, you need to keep it cold, but not ice cold. So if your furnace is down, it may not be the best choice. Don't keep it in your garage because you don't want wine to ever freeze. It's a whole science that I can never really get behind trying to age a wine for 30 or 40 years. I mean, I've only, lived in my house for 3 years. And before that we had nowhere to store wine. So it's, to get into it, it makes sense. You can make, if you're doing it as an investment, you can make a lot of money. I was in a wine cellar locally, that's 6,000 square feet with all the temperature control and everything like that. But there's $20 million worth of wine down there. And I don't know, a lot. I couldn't quite add it up while I was standing there.
You know what, in that same vein, glasses. Someone asked how important it is to use the right glass and how should you think about glasses with different types of wine?
Yes. So this is not a subject that I necessarily am really an expert on. I know it makes a difference. So we have done wine tastings where we'll taste the same Pinot Noir out of 5 different glasses. And it does, you can tell a difference. I just try to drink wine out of bigger glasses. I like the idea. Again, it's, for me, a lot of this is aesthetic. It feels right. The white wine glass works well for white wine. Andrea, who was talking about the champagne, said she drinks out of a coupe sometimes. I drink my champagne exclusively out of a coupe. I mean, it's really, there it is. Yeah, if you can see it, there she is.
I've been so fascinated as I'm looking through everyone here on Zoom, the different vessels that
Yeah,
folks are
and
drinking.
I love those kind of glasses are great. Again, it holds just the right amount. It's, you know, the champagne glasses are supposed to have, you know, they come to a curve to try to.
Yeah, they're
crack.
trying to make them like trying to get you to buy all the new, like more like white wine glasses for the, but I have like really good crystal like flutes and they're beautiful. And the way that I drink champagne, it goes down so fast, it doesn't really matter. But the coupes, I think this is like a very cheap glass, vintage glass I bought, but then I have my really good crystal champagne flutes. I'm not going to get rid of them just to buy brand new, very expensive champagne glasses that look like Chardonnay glasses. But you know, that's what they're saying, that has become such a big thing. I do think for red wine, having a bigger glass, absolutely. And when you're doing tastings, especially with more vintage wines that you've stored or you're using a Coravin for, it depends on the white and the red, right? And then what you want to use. I think it only enhances it a little bit more if you're either, like you were saying, some people will decant, or some people will use an aerator. Some people will just like let it sit out in your glass for a little bit longer. But it's all a marketing ploy in some ways.
It is, and they can be quite expensive. So I don't personally, I don't recommend. I have red wine glasses at home, white wine glasses, coupes, and we do have champagne flutes and things like that. I mean, I don't put much stock into it. I mean,
then there's party glasses that you have for the party.
Yes, yeah, what I'm drinking here at the wine shop, we just have these cheap party glasses, which work great.
Sorry, I didn't mean to pop in.
The party glasses are a must.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, agreed. You have to have them.
We had another
24 at your house
question
at all
come
times.
through about tannins and acidity and how that influences the taste of wine. So what's your take there?
Tannins and acidity influence the taste of wine differently. I mean, differently, but I guess sort of similarly. Acid comes into your mouth as like lime juice, lemon juice, you know, with more like, I guess wine is more like lime juice, where it doesn't make you like, you know, pucker, but it just feels like you're drinking something that has this high toned acidity. Tannins are the thing that kind of make the inside of your mouth feel dry. They are appropriate in all types of red wine. White wine doesn't necessarily have tannins. The orange wine has some because it's aged on the skins and stems, but the tannins come from skins and stems. Tannins are also very high in black tea. When you drink black tea, you get that sort of drying effect in your mouth. That's tannins. They give wine a dryness and sort of enhances the flavor. For me, it's you need to have balance in wine. For me, balance is very important. Any wine that's like too tannic, too acidic, too sweet, too alcohol, too fruity, it just kind of ruins the entire experience. So they affect they influence the taste in the same way that like a lime or anything like that. Sort of when you squeeze lime on a taco, you have this like, oh, now there's this pop of acidity. It makes everything kind of taste better because everything is now in balance as your taste buds are seeking out these different flavor profiles like tannin or like acid or fruit or sweet. You know, you're always looking for those things when you eat something.
So I'm hopeful this will be a very celebratory summer.
Mm-hmm.
Fingers crossed, right?
Yeah.
I think we're trending in that direction. There's some light at the end of the tunnel. So as we look into the summer, where would you steer people? You obviously spent some time on rosés, but for people who want to celebrate, who want to gather, kind of what are your thoughts?
I would say just drink rosé, of course, but maybe if you drink Provence rosé and you're stuck there, maybe go to an Italian rosé or something, even maybe something from the United States or Germany or Austria. They have some of my favorite rosés. And my favorite rosé on the market right now is from Austria. And so I'd say branch out with your rosés, drink more white wine, but interesting, maybe branch out with those two. Maybe if you drink a lot of Sauvignon Blanc, maybe drink something different, a Gruner Veltliner or a Godeo from Spain or a Vermentino from Italy. Like branch out. That's what I always try to get people to do, is sort of stay in their comfort zone, but adjacent. You know, it's like if you love Sauvignon Blanc, maybe we do Grillo from Sicily. And then they have a very similar flavor profile, but it's something different. And then that leads to some, you're like, oh, I had Grillo, now maybe I'll move to this. And then
And we heard the love of
off you
champagne.
go on your wine journey. I think that's what I would say. More sparkling wine. Drink more sparkling wine. That's a big one for me.
I think that's the big takeaway from this. There cannot be enough bubbles in our lives right now, especially after the last year.
It's true. Yeah, bubbles. I mean, it doesn't. You don't need to be celebrating anything to drink bubbly wine.
Bubbles with hot dogs. Try
Bubbles
it.
with hot dogs.
And who
bubbles-
doesn't like the
Fabulous
pop,
combination.
right? Everyone
Yeah, right.
loves the sound of the pop of a bottle, right?
Right.
Everyone
It
loves
does-
that.
It's great. It just makes you somehow feel better. The pop of a bottle, or some of them now are having like a soda pop top on it, the pet nats and things like that.
And it just makes everyone feel a little bit better when they think they're having bubbles, whether it's for Prosecco, Franciacorta, regular champagne. I always feel like it just makes people feel good. They love the sound. And there's all price points that you can get everything at. So
There
A
is.
little more expensive than wine.
it depends.
Depends. Yeah, you can find them
Depends
right
on
in
the price
the
point.
wine
You
pricing.
actually get really good. That's why like it varies on price point.
It does. I would say overall, you know, if you spend $20 on a bottle of sparkling wine, you're going to be happy with it.
Mhm.
Cremant from Spain, well, from France, with Cremant is just
Or South
sparkling wine,
Africa, Grand
or
Beck.
South Africa, yeah.
That's a nice, easy one. And it's
From
like
Hungary, from
$20.
Hungary.
Hungary, that's right.
Right.
Bosco's always got the Hungarian wines. Yep.
Oh, the Takais from Hungary are phenomenal.
No,
We-
just a rosé, nice rosé.
Well, I
Somebody
think-
put
I think-
Portuguese
Sorry,
Vino Verde also has bubbles, which is true. That's how that pent up CO2.
Australian. I've had
Australian bubbles.
Australian red Syrah, fabulous.
Yes. Lambrusco from Italy is also, you can have it in red or rosé, and that's a really fun wine. I tend to skip. Lambrusco got a bad rap because of the Riuniti in the 70s and stuff like that. So it's just now sort of crawling back out of that. And you can find some really great Lambrusco. I mean, when I went to Italy 3 years ago, and you know, Lambrusco is from Emilia Romagna, which is where everything great in Italy comes from there. You know, tortellini, balsamic vinegar, Parmesan cheese, prosciutto, Ferraris, and Lamborghinis. It's all from this one area. So this wine can be very serious, and it's a nice, fun alternative to.
We can even do Mum, right? Mum is a great one. Like
Yeah, of course, from
that's something
California.
if
Yeah,
I decide to open. I'm really not always big on sparkling. I really like champagne, but I think like the Mum rosés are really great and very celebratory.
yeah. We at home, I drink a lot of Roeder Estate Rosé, which is from Anderson Valley.
They're
in
fabulous.
California. Yeah, it's fabulous wine. It doesn't break the bank, and I've never ever met anybody or seen anybody who didn't like it. I mean, really, you drink
And
it and
you
you're
can get
like,
a champagne stopper if you don't want to finish it that night.
that's true. Yeah, and we have those here at the store. Everybody should invest in it.
Champagne stoppers are fabulous. They'll last for a couple of days.
Yeah, is that how you should? So let's say you aren't going to finish a bottle of either champagne or wine. How should we preserve it, Jim?
The champagne stopper is great. If you're doing sparkling wine, that is pretty much required, and then put it in your refrigerator because the cold air lets that CO2 reabsorb into the wine. If you're doing a red wine, the refrigerator would be your best friend. You can cork it, put it in the fridge, keep it out of the sun, keep it out of the warm air. Just let it come back up to room temperature before you drink the red. It doesn't, you know, it does make it last a few. This is not a problem I ever have, if I'm being completely honest. It's like people ask me all the time, how can I keep this wine? And I just say, yep, refrigerator, keep it corked. There's those pump out things, you know, you can get a Coravin if you just like having a glass of wine a night. Believe it or not, there are some actual boxed wines on the market that are good, and those last a month. So you know, if you I know we have a customer who's like, her doctor prescribed her 4 ounces of wine every night, and she just gets the box, and 4
So
ounces and
a really interesting question came in because I think we've all heard this.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law puts a spoon in the champagne bottle to keep it. Does it work or is it a myth?
So do I.
I
24 hours in the refrigerator, you won't even notice it.
there you go.
That it's
See?
been open.
But Bosco said it works. So if it doesn't work, it does work. I've tried it ourselves. Of course it works.
It really works. It really works. And with the handle down, of course, because you can't get a spoon in there, but the upside down spoon, it really works. At least 24 hours, if not more.
It does. I don't know the science behind it. But
Nobody knows.
nobody knows. It's a magic. Wine magic, I guess.
Well,
So whoever raised that point, we agree.
and I think on that, we can probably wrap the questions and raise a glass to drinking what we love, having lots of champagne and bubbles across the summer. And Jim, thank you for this fabulous talk.
Thank you guys. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And now I will turn it back over to Bosco.
Thank you so much. This is fun.
Bosco, over to
Thank
you.
you, thank you, Jim and Frankie, for this extremely instructive happy hour. I've been drinking wine for longer than I care to remember. And I learned something every time, and I learned a lot tonight. So thank you so much, and making this program really a star in our series of Zoom programs. Speaking of which, I just want to call your attention that the library, because we cannot get together yet at live events until we hope maybe in June outdoors, but not until then. So we have 4 very exciting new Zoom coming up in the month of March. On the 8th of March, which is the Thursday at 7 p.m., we have from Adama Farm, Sadek, is doing a wonderful class on composting in your backyard, composting your garden weeds or your food scraps. And as you know, compost is a wonderful food for plants. So I think that will be interesting, especially at this time of the year. Then on the 10th, we have a sort of a discussion about a wonderful exhibit that's on the art wall at the library right now. It's Small Town, Big Talk, superb photographs and quotes from people in Falls Village who are very, very expressive about what they hope to see in the village. And it's also in a small book, which is available at the library. So there will be a discussion about that exhibition on the 10th in the evening at 7:30. Then on the 17th, we have Ginny Apple, a favorite of our Zoom audiences. She's a master wildlife conservationist, and she will be speaking about beavers in Connecticut. And that's at 2 p.m. In the afternoon, a Saturday afternoon. And finally, on the 25th, we go back to Adama Farm, where Carly Sugar will tell us all about preserving with lacto fermentation. Now, we've been talking about fermentation of wine. Well, this will be fermentation of bread, of grains, fruit, vegetables, dairy, how to keep things the traditional old-fashioned way. And I think it'll be fascinating at this time of the year. So we hope to see you there then. And please look at our website and look to see when these programs are. And please sign up for our newsletter also, which will keep you abreast of what's happening at your library. So with that, I wish you all a very good night and a very, very, very good health. And let's keep drinking. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.